Today on Teach Me How to Vegan.
Okay, let's talk about best for baking, because I know people will probably ask, what is the best one to bake with?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a question that has a lot of nuance to it,
Yeah.
because it depends on what you're baking.
Yeah.
That's what I would answer. And you're obviously a lot more experienced than I am,
Yeah.
but what would you say to my answer?
So I like to bake more with rice and almond milk. And I think it's partly because of what we buy. Because there's a flavor profile in the silk. We usually get the red box silk.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a flavor profile in there that sometimes I don't want in my baking. And so I bake with those because there's that certain flavor profile is missing.
Welcome to Teach Me How to Vegan.
A podcast where we explore how to switch to a vegan diet.
I'm Tony, a health educator, fitness instructor, and plant-based eating program manager for Animal Protection of New Mexico.
I'm Mickey, a stay-at-home homeschooling mom and vegan cook who likes to play in the kitchen.
Our family stopped eating meat in 2007.
And we went vegan in 2016. Now we like to share with others what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's get started.
Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for joining us. Today's topic is Got Vegan Milk. The things we're going to cover is we're going to talk about some of the numerous types of plant-based milks that are available to buy or make at home.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to just kind of touch on some of the, again, countless brands that are available. We're going to share a little bit about the why you might want to choose plant-based milk over dairy milk. And then we're going to just talk about some of our preferences in specific categories, such as which is the creamiest, which is the best for baking, which is the best to pair with cookies, which is the best for drinking plain. And then we're also going to talk about which is the closest to cow milk in terms of nutrition and in terms of taste and texture.
Okay.
Right? So
I think you're going to have some opinions on the pairings part.
I think that is a spoiler. I'm going to have some opinions.
Yeah.
I'm a little particular in this area.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the good thing is you get to hear from somebody who's particular in these sorts of things.
Yep.
And we're not going to go down the realm of pairing with coffee and tea because we did that for an entire episode a while back. So you could just check the coffee break episode if you're interested in that conversation. We're going to save that for that episode as we've already done it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, before we get started all about the milk, I just want to mention this great organization called Eat the Change is doing an incredible planet challenge for the month of April. So it kicks off on April 1st, which is the day this episode is released, hopefully the day you're listening to it. And this challenge is really cool because it runs for 21 days and it has a different challenge every day. And so we're kicking it off April 1st with celebrating their first challenge, which is the challenge for the first day is swap animal milk for plant milk, like make the swap. Use plant milk instead of animal milk.
Cool.
So that's why we wanted to do this episode to share in case you want to try this challenge and you're not sure where to start or what to do, but I want to have it with cookies. What do I do now? We got you covered. And I would encourage you, everyone, to just take a look at this incredible planet challenge. You can look for it on social media. It's a hashtag Incredible Planet Challenge. You can also go to eatthechange.com and learn about it there and look at the challenge for each individual day. Mm-hmm. With that said, we'll go ahead and talk all about the vegan milks, the plant-based milks.
What you got first? Because you feel pretty strongly about the plant-based milks.
I do, and that's why I want to really educate people on this very important topic. Because, they're a big part of my life in terms of food. It's always been, a lot of my comfort foods involve milk.
Mm-hmm. Like cereal.
Right, like cereal. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Oats.
Mm-hmm. And, nowadays, I can't have a slice of cake without milk.
Yeah.
I cannot have cookies without milk.
Yep.
I just can't do it. All right, so to start off, for people who are new, I'm just going to rattle off 12 of the types of plant-based milks that I know of.
Which is interesting because I feel like a lot of people don't think there's that many, so. Fill us in.
I lied, it's 13.
Ooh,
And there's
okay.
probably more, but this is just what I could come up with off the top of my
your
head.
head. Okay.
Okay? So, ready?
Mm-hmm.
There is soy, almond, oat, coconut, rice, flax, cashew, macadamia, walnut, hazelnut, pea, hemp, and quinoa.
That's a lot.
There's options.
Yeah. There's options.
Yeah. So if you're like, I tried almond milk and I did not like it. We got 12 other options for you to try before.
Before you throw out the whole kit and caboodle of plant milks.
So lots of options. Again, you can buy these. You can make them. We could talk more about making them at home in another episode. If there's interest. I don't think we have time to get into that detail today.
And some of them aren't hard. They
Right.
just take a little time. Like I've seen people talk about making their own almond milk and oat milk, and you make cashew creamer for us pretty quickly, randomly when we're out of creamer. So
Right, and we talked about that in the coffee episode too. But yeah,
Perfect.
that's exactly right. Some of them you can make in no time flat. You just gotta learn it and knock it out. And then some of the brands. So I'm just gonna rattle off some of the brands that I'm aware of that I think are pretty good, and you might wanna. Just think
chime
about,
in.
yeah.
Okay.
So there is Silk, Oatly, Almond Breeze, Soy Delicious, Ripple, Pacific Foods, Planet Oat, West Soy, Not Co, Blue Diamond, Eden Foods, and then there's store brands like Trader Joe's, Great Value, Whole Foods, etc. The list goes on.
Kirkland's at Costco.
Goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Naturally, I put Silk at the top.
Naturally.
Silk
and then
Oatly. Again, options.
So many options. So, do you want to talk about why you love Silk so much?
Sure. And this is, I'm so glad you asked.
And this is, full disclosure, the primary plant milk we buy.
Right.
Because we have a particular person and persons in our home who prefer Silk. Because even the boys, I think Teen in particular, maybe. I don't know if Fortune is as particular as you and him, but I could be wrong. Anyway.
Well, and partly is I just can't really explain it.
Right.
It's, like if somebody asks you, what does milk taste like? You can't really explain it.
Right.
So for me to tell you why do you like Silk so much better than other brands, I don't really have an answer that I could put into words. It's just the one that I prefer. It
hits that spot that milk used to hit for you.
Yep, exactly.
Something like that. Well, but you do talk about how it is creamier and thicker than some other kinds of milks, like almond milk and rice milk.
Oh, yeah.
And for you, that matters.
Yes. Yeah. So soy in particular, soy and oat are creamier and thicker. And that's why I tend to choose those types over other types. And then within that, of course, different brands are different.
Right.
So if you've tried a soy milk before and you're like, no, that was not thick and creamy, or I didn't like the flavor, it's just like any other food. You try one brand of something, a different brand might taste totally different.
Yeah.
You know?
And our example for that is dolmas.
Oh, yeah.
The Trader Joe dolmas is highly preferred in our household over the Costco dolmas.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing.
So if you've only tried the
right.
Costco dolmas, you're like, those are gross. I don't like dolmas, period. Don't write them off.
Right.
You might have just tried a brand you didn't care for.
And it's the same thing with the plant milks.
Yeah, so try a different brand. Because like you say, we buy Kirkland's often just because it's shelf stable and easy to have as a backup when we run out of Silk. And so Tony doesn't freak out and lose his mind because we don't have any soy milk in the house.
Because that's never happened before.
And the Kirkland's is not my favorite.
Right.
It's not as good as Silk. It's pretty much the same ingredients. I'm not sure what's going on.
Soy milk.
Silk soy milk, right.
Because Costco has a Silk almond milk, but it's not the same.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out too.
Yes.
So again, we just highly encourage try different types and different brands within each different type. So real quick, let's just talk a little bit about the why, because we did the why with our very first episode, but there's some more whys that are kind of specific to dairy that maybe we could flesh out a little bit more.
Okay.
Right. Because some people tell me, well, if you want milk, just drink milk. And if you want to be vegan, then just don't drink milk. Like, why go through the trouble to make plant milk? It's so unnatural, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, we know flavors, textures, comfort foods, all of those things. We don't go vegan because we thought milk was disgusting.
Right.
We actually thought it was quite tasty.
Yeah.
But with that said, we might want to avoid milk because of lactose intolerance. And if you look at the statistics, a far higher number of people are lactose intolerant than
not.
Or than we might think.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in our state, in New Mexico. I did my own little research and calculations, and I'm
number crunching.
Based on what I've read and numbers that I've crunched, I'm guessing at least half the people in our state are lactose intolerant.
Yeah, because of the rates of lactose intolerance in Native communities, African American communities, and Hispanic communities.
Exactly.
So being that our state's population is roughly 50%, or is it more than 50%?
It's more than 50%.
More than 50% of our state is those communities. So we're going to have a pretty high rate of lactose intolerance.
Right. So just right off the bat, there's a decent chance that you have that. Okay. And then lactose intolerance aside, that doesn't account for people with allergies to milk.
Right.
Some people have allergies to milk.
Which is separate. So you said lactose intolerance aside, there's also lactose sensitivity, which is also a separate thing from allergies to milk.
Yep.
Because you can have the sensitivity and it can affect you, but you're not quite intolerant and you're not quite allergic.
Exactly. So the third one is, sensitivities. And the sensitivities are things that don't necessarily get diagnosed.
Right.
Like food allergies do, or lactose intolerance.
Right.
The sensitivity is something entirely different. And again, most people might have this without even knowing it. And so I'm speaking from experience. I don't know what I have, if it's lactose intolerance, an allergy, or just a sensitivity. All I know is that when I gave up dairy, when I stopped eating dairy, my asthma improved, my seasonal allergies improved, my flatulence improved, for lack of a better word. And I realized, I had something. I don't know what it was, but I had something.
There's definitely a reaction happening when you ate dairy.
Yeah. And even with, energy and headaches and all these things, it's like I didn't realize how bad I felt until I didn't feel so bad anymore.
Right.
And dairy was the thing that was the turning point. When I stopped dairy, everything changed.
Yeah.
Because we stopped eating meat, and I didn't see those kinds of changes.
Right.
And then we stopped with the dairy and the eggs. We stopped dairy and egg at the same time.
Yeah.
But eggs weren't a daily thing for me.
Right.
But dairy was.
And
that's when it was like a whole different world. So I really like to encourage people to think about sensitivities and not just allergies and lactose intolerance, even though those are really
prominent and prevalent.
Right. We also need to think about that. And then there's also inflammation that dairy causes. Dairy in the research has been shown to increase cancer risk, which is a whole nother thing. On top of the estrogen in dairy.
Yes, which is so ironic because a lot of people go on and on about the estrogen in soy. However, they're different.
Right. People will avoid soy because of what they think has estrogen when it actually doesn't, has phytoestrogen. That's a different thing. And then they'll go drink the milk from a pregnant cow, and it's just loaded with estrogen. So we actually got deep into that conversation in our soy episode with the dietitian, Gabriel Garden. So if you want more on that, that was an hour-long conversation about the estrogens and everything soy. So, but yeah, that's a whole nother thing. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, animal protection.
Yeah.
Some people just want to avoid dairy to help protect animals. And some people might be thinking, well, dairy doesn't actually harm animals.
I think we explored it a little bit in another episode where we talked about when we first went vegetarian, we actually missed the dairy industry and what actually happens in the dairy industry and how harmful it actually is. And that when we first went vegan, we actually struggled with not going vegan sooner because of how much harm we caused in that interim.
Mm-hmm.
And so we highly encourage you to do some more research, if you haven't already, into the dairy industry to see how harmful it actually is. It's rough.
Yeah. Well said. Well
Yeah.
said. Exactly. That's another important reason
Yeah.
to consider.
And I think if you can find a plant milk you like, it can be an easy switch.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, we've talked in the past about what are some easy switches you can do, and maybe what's the last switch you do if you're doing baby steps to veganism and plant-based. And maybe a plant milk is one of the easier steps for you. Once you find one that you absolutely love, like Tony loves silk, then you are good to go.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And another thing is, I'll encourage people to think too, the very first time you have it, it might, quote unquote, not taste right. Right? Because you're used to one thing forever and ever, and then you try something different and you're like, no, that's not right. But that doesn't mean you don't like it.
Right.
It just means your brain is trying to wrap its mind around.
Wrap itself around what's happening.
Right. And because we're creatures of habit,
Yeah.
and we get so attached to things. One analogy is, I like malto meal. I grew up eating malto meal, and it always had whole milk in it because that's how grandma did it, and it was super good. And then the first time I tried my malto meal with soy milk, it was like something's off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it's a different thing,
Yeah.
right? But I kept giving it a chance a couple more times, and then I really liked it. Oh, this is really good.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's the default to me.
Mm-hmm.
Silk soy milk in my malto meal is what tastes right. And I wonder if cow milk would actually taste wrong now, because
Right.
I made the shift.
Right.
And another example, because it's not just with animal foods, I used to always put white sugar in my coffee every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every day, white sugar, sugar. Not tons of it, but that's what I used.
Yeah.
And then I decided I wanted to try a different sweetener, like maple syrup or agave, and they tasted off to me. It's like, I don't like this, it's off. Well, I stuck with it,
Mm-hmm.
and now that tastes normal and good to me,
Mm-hmm.
and white sugar in my coffee tastes off and
Mm-hmm.
gross.
It's interesting because when we talk about, feeding our kids food and how many times you have to introduce a food to a child for them to sort of get accustomed to it and to really get a taste for it, quote unquote, a taste for it. There's a conversation about that's, out in the world that is relatively familiar to most people with kids anyway, because, it's a pretty common thing in households with children.
Mm-hmm.
But we forget that children grow up into adults who still have that adjustment period to our taste buds. It's the same thing for adults.
Mm-hmm.
We seem to think it's only a thing that happens to kids, and it's not a thing that we're going to experience also when we're trying to change the way we eat or making changes to what we're partaking of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's like, give yourself an opportunity to adjust. Don't automatically one taste and throw it out. I don't like it. I didn't like it. Now, if there's something else, if that's your initial reaction and there's something else holding you up, hanging you up, then that's a different conversation. That's a different exploration for you. But keep trying it and finding something you do like, because I don't think there is I think everybody can find a plant substitute
Right.
for just about anything.
Right.
And I think the milks in particular, you can definitely find, there's so many now that I do think that has become such an easier thing to shift than even the cheeses probably. There's more cheeses now, but I think there's even more milk than cheeses.
Mm-hmm.
So the milk swap is probably even a little bit easier than the cheese swap.
Right.
But that's because I was a cheese aficionado.
Right.
So maybe it was different for you.
Yeah. But this is an important takeaway, because you can certainly find a swap if you give yourself time to adjust.
Yes, yeah. And I think, we might get impatient with our kids, and so we might get impatient with ourselves as well. But I just, encourage us to remember that, we are, sometimes we're still big kids who need that grace period to adjust.
I like that. I'm kind of a big kid anyway.
It struck me how you were talking about that. I'm like, oh, this is the way we talk about kids.
Yeah.
But maybe people aren't extending that kind of tenacity of continuing to get your kids to adjust their taste buds to themselves. And so maybe let's just encourage pointing that out.
Good call.
Thanks.
Yeah. And we do it with ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. Because like you love silk and you will drink silk just like you'll just drink a cup of silk. I have not found a plant. I used to drink milk with meals, 90s kid. Remember, you get milk with like spaghetti. First, that's a major association for me. Or like my, I feel like my chicken and potatoes dinner, mashed potato dinner that I like with gravy and stuff used to come with a glass of milk. And so there's certain meals that I used to drink with a glass of milk. I have not found a plant-based milk that I like enough to drink with a meal like that anymore. I'm hoping maybe the next milk might be it, because I was really pleasantly pleased with that one. And Ripple, I think, is probably okay for me, but they're that one's a little pricey for our budget.
Right.
But I like Silk enough in malto meal, cereal, oats, with a couple of cookies. I only do a little bit with my milk and cookies, and that's my taste preference, and that's where I'm at. But I haven't thrown out the whole kit and caboodle.
But I wonder if you gave it enough tries. Like, how many times have you had a glass of this one specific kind of milk with that specific meal,
right,
and done that pairing?
Yeah,
because that's another thing that we do too. And so you have to retrain your brain with the pairings.
Yeah,
that's what I've had to do with coffee over the years, because I want to pair coffee with everything, and nothing tastes good if I don't have coffee with it. And I had to like retrain my mind, like, you could also drink tea with this,
right,
or water, God forbid, or and so that's maybe part of the adjustment,
right? Because there's some flavor profile in the Silk that for me at this point doesn't pair with certain meals,
right?
So it does still take time if I want to take that time. And thus far, I've decided to not try and take that time, because I'm fine with water with those meals instead, or iced tea or something else. So it does, it's also fine to say, I like this enough for these things, and I'm fine with not having this pairing.
Yeah. And you're good like that.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll drink water with meals.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue, because, you were talking about your association with cow milk and certain foods. And I think a lot of people might have that, like I did. And so let's talk about what's the closest plant milk of all the plant milks that I just named earlier on. Which ones are the closest to cow milk in terms of taste and texture? So you mentioned the Silk Next milk.
Yeah.
I wonder, is that your...
It might be. So we only had it that one time. And I feel like I've only had Ripple a couple times by itself. But I think for me, those two might be the closest. Now, it has been a long time since I've had cow milk.
6 years.
6.5, 7 years.
It'll be 6 years in April.
Okay.
In a couple weeks.
So 6 years. It's been 6 years. So, my memory of it, like you said, how do you describe what cow milk tastes like? That's a hard thing to do. But I think I might, because I think the Next milk and the Ripple don't have a certain mild flavor profile that some of the other plant milks have, that I associate more with the plant milks. There's something absent in the Next milk that to me makes it closer to cow milk. Does that make sense? Okay.
No, it totally does. Because I feel like with the soy milk, you can taste the soy somehow.
Maybe that's it.
And with the almond milk, you can almost... It's again, it's hard to explain because it doesn't, quote unquote, taste like soy.
Right.
Like soy milk doesn't taste like edamame or tofu or anything like that.
Right.
But there's still a distinct something.
Yeah, there's a distinct flavor profile.
And same thing with almond milk. It doesn't taste like almonds when you eat almonds, but it has something different.
Yeah.
With that said, with the Next milk, it doesn't have any of those flavors.
Right.
Like you can't tell, oh, this comes from soy, or this comes from oat, or this comes from, you can't identify the plant because they got it
They did something. Yeah.
to have that mild
Mm-hmm.
or that lack of flavor, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
But with the right texture. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And it was a good creaminess and
Mhm.
thickness,
Yeah.
which I liked. And we just randomly found it at a random Walmart. I found it and was like, "What's this? We're going to get it and try it." And the next Walmart I was at, I haven't seen it at. So I don't know what the availability is on it, but
But keep a lookout for it because
yes.
I think that would be my vote too. I think that's the closest I've ever seen. And also, I know this because right away I was like, I wonder what this would taste like on malted milk.
That's an interest that you
wonder-
went immediately there.
Yep. And then, and Oreos and Fruity Pebbles, the things I grew up with,
Yeah. Yep.
you know,
Immediately to that nostalgic
the nostalgic. Yeah.
memories. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I wonder how it would be with your spaghetti meal.
Right. Yeah. That's what made I thought of like, oh, wait a minute. This lacks that slight flavor I find in other plant milks, that I don't mind enough to cut them out. I still drink it, but it lacks it enough that I'm like, oh, maybe this with my childhood association meals with milk.
And then I think a close runner-up is the not milk. That was the one that I got at Sprouts, and it even has a cow on it.
Oh, yes.
And it even
That's
looks
right.
like I had a triple take and read it. I'm like, is this milk or is it not milk? I know it says not milk, but it
has a cow.
looks like milk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because, I'm paranoid about accidentally buying something that's not vegan.
Yeah.
I think most people can easily discern
Yeah.
what's going on. I just had a moment with it, but the similarities again.
Yeah, they
it
were
has
pretty.
that like mildness that you talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's really close. Again, I'm like, this could pair well with anything that I grew up with.
Mhm.
I think
Wow.
so.
We'll have to try that one again too.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to keep our eye out for these two.
Yeah, and interestingly, I tried both of these with coffee.
How'd that go?
Good. It tasted like when I used to run out of creamer and use whole milk in my coffee.
Mm. Yeah.
It's the same thing. I'm sure they would make glorious lattes
I bet.
or like café con leche.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then I'm just going to throw this out there. If you want something that's similar to skim milk, like if skim milk is your thing, you know what I'm going to say, don't
Are
you?
you gonna say rice milk?
Yes. Because that's why I hate rice milk, because it reminds me of skim milk, and I hated skim milk my whole life.
Ay.
I'm the grumpy person that's like, might as well just pour water on your cereal.
You are that person.
Anyway, if you like rice milk, I'm sorry. Or if you like skim milk, and if that's your thing, I'm happy for you.
Yes.
I'm way more picky than that. And with that said, rice milk has its place that we'll talk about later on. So that's what's closest to cow milk in taste and texture. Let's talk about the creamiest. What's the creamiest milk? You already know. I like silk soy milk.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the creamiest on the market, but I think it's perfect. Because anything creamier is just too thick and creamy to drink by itself. You know?
Yeah.
Anything creamier, then I kind of want to, again, put it in coffee or tea or
Right.
something like that. It's almost too much for me.
Right.
I have a line, apparently.
Well, and I think also there's something to be said for affordability around these milks too.
Mm-hmm.
And silk at Walmart, at least, is very affordable
Mm-hmm.
in our experience. So that's also another aspect to keep in mind as well.
That's a very good point. I think we should include that in the conversation moving forward because the next milk is amazing and the price point's a little bit higher.
Ripple?
No, the Silk Next milk.
Oh, the silk next. Yeah.
And the not milk, same thing.
Yeah.
The
And the
price
ripples.
point's quite a bit higher, and Ripple as well.
Yeah.
So, because I was gonna say Ripple is one of the creamiest as well,
It's really good.
and it's not too much, but it feels like it's more filling to me.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think that's why your sister on the soups chooses it for the soups.
yeah, because it's great for
It's
for
great
cooking with because it's so thick and creamy.
to get that creaminess in soups and
It's great
stews
for
or whatever.
mashed potatoes and things that you want to add that
that oomph too.
that creamy too.
Yeah.
And if you're just out like out running errands and you're at the grocery store and you kind of want like you're kind of hungry but you don't want to eat a meal, get a chocolate ripple.
Oh yes,
And that'll like
do it.
It's not a meal replacement by any means, but it's like filling enough for me. It sustains me until I get home and can eat.
And honestly, it reminds me now. I don't know if I'm aging myself here, but that's okay because I don't care. I like my age. Those childhood chocolate milk cartons from school. And those wonderfully chocolatey, thick and creamy cartons of milk. Ripple, the chocolate Ripple milks that you can buy just in a little bottle. Oh man, if you miss those chocolate milks, try the chocolate Ripple.
Yeah.
It's so good. And but like the price points on that brand, it's more like a treat for our budget.
For us, correct. Yeah. And then another one that I think is really creamy is the cashew milks. Can be quite creamy, particularly the Silk brand.
Yes.
Cashew milk.
The Silk chocolate cashew
that
is amazing.
Creaminess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think all the Silks at Walmart's are all price pointed well.
Pretty similar, yeah.
Pretty similarly and affordably.
And Silk also makes one that is I think it's branded or titled like a high protein, like a protein milk.
Okay.
And it's because it has like pretty much double the protein that like the Silk one has. I mention it because again, thick and creamy.
Yeah.
Like when my sister does soups, she'll get that one sometimes.
Yeah.
For soups or teas it's almost like a half and half.
Yeah.
I think. And I think it's cashew and pea protein combined. So that one's
another one
that's like super creamy. Okay, let's talk about best for baking because I know people will probably ask, what is the best one to bake with? And this is a question that has a lot of nuance to it because it depends on what you're baking.
Yeah.
That's what I would answer. And you're obviously a lot more experienced than I am, but what would you say to my answer?
So I like to bake more with rice and almond milk. And I think it's partly because of what we buy. Because there's a flavor profile in the Silk, we usually get the red box Silk. And there's a flavor profile in there that sometimes I don't want in my baking. And so the rice milk or the almond milk, usually it's the Kirkland ones that we're getting. I bake with those because there's that certain flavor profile is missing. And I I want, if I'm baking a cake, I want to taste the cake and not the soy milk, or if I'm making biscuits, I just want regular biscuits, not sweet biscuits. There's a flavor profile that you don't want to go for. And so I tend to lean towards almond milks, unsweetened almond milks, and rice milks, unsweetened rice milks for that. Now, if you want like buttermilk biscuits, I think you want to go with a creamier plant milk. And so maybe you do the unsweetened Silk for a creamier one and you make your buttermilk out of that.
Okay.
But if you don't mind the flavor profile, maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe people don't. I don't know. Maybe it's just me because, I'm particular in some things too. If you don't mind it, then you just cook for whatever you want. If you need something that's a little thicker and creamier, get a thick and creamy plant milk. If you need something that's a little thinner, maybe you're doing a rice milk instead. So it just kind of depends. And also, like, let's be real, budgets are a thing. And so for me, sometimes it also comes into play, like I have more of this milk and it can go further for me in baking than in drinking. Therefore, that's what I'm choosing also.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And I think that's why sometimes I lean toward like if I'm baking, which is rare, or if I'm making like pancakes or something, I'll use the almond milk or the rice milk because I know they're cheaper or I don't want to drink them plain, but they'll make some really great baked goods.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? That's why I say they definitely have their place.
Yeah.
And I think some things you might even find that like rice milk gives you the best outcome.
Right.
If you're looking for fluffiness in something or, you know what I mean? It really just depends on the recipe and exactly what you're baking.
Yeah. And that's going to be trial and error, which might be frustrating. Sorry, we can't give you any more guidance. That's kind of just been our experience. When I have the option, when I'm making biscuits and I have the option of milks, if I have rice milk, I'm always picking rice milk for my biscuits because I like the way they come out better. I just like the way they come out that way.
Yeah.
But I will, if I want biscuits, I'm going to use whatever I got on hand because I want biscuits.
Right.
So.
As long as it's not like a vanilla milk or something.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I'll use like the vanilla milks in like the pancakes and stuff because I might normally add vanilla anyway, or cupcakes or something like that. Muffins, for that little extra flavor and sweetness.
Right. And a quick note on pancakes. Pancakes are very forgiving.
Yes.
So if you're just starting to enter the realm of cooking and baking vegan or with vegan milks, pancakes might be a good place to start.
Yes.
Because you don't need the exact chemistry
right.
for the pancakes to work out.
Right. Yeah.
And so you can experiment there before you go into like cake baking, which you do need some pretty good chemistry to get the fluffy and the texture and all that. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your expertise in the baking realm.
Sure.
And now let's talk about what's best with cookies.
I think this is going to be subjective. Because like you said, if some people like skim milk, they're going to want a thinner milk.
Right.
But you really love your silk with milk and cookies. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm probably going to be a Next Milk fan for milk and cookies.
Yeah.
We're going to have to get it again and try it.
We are. And now
oh, darn. We have to taste test some milk and cookies. Shucks.
It's for educational purposes.
Yes.
But I want to say something. I want to go deep into this because I also think Oatly oat milk is super good.
Yeah.
I think we haven't been giving that enough love.
Full transparency, it's because we don't get it very often.
Yeah, it's a little bit, again, higher price point. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, like when we first went vegan, things were more expensive in general. Mm-hmm. And I used to say, like, one day when I'm rich, I'm going to drink Silk soy milk every day because all we could afford was like the cheaper ones at the time.
Yeah.
And then, supply and demand did its thing and the price came down. And now I feel rich because I'm drinking Silk soy milk every day. Yeah. Like, I made it, y'all.
Yeah. Well,
but now I say, when I'm rich one day, I'm going to drink Oatly oat milk every day.
Yeah. Hopefully inflation doesn't hit our plant milks too hard right now.
I know. Hopefully it keeps working in our
the supply
favor.
And demand overrides the inflation happening.
Yeah. Because the texture is just on point. And in terms of cookies specifically, now I love Silk soy with all my heart. And if you like to dunk your cookies, it doesn't always soak into the cookies the way you want it to when you dunk. Mm-hmm. See, sometimes I like to do the bite and drink type of thing. And so sometimes almond milk, Mickey's giving me a look.
I have wide eyes right now.
Or some other kind of milk might be your preference so that it can soak into your cookies correctly.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about because I find I hold my Oreos in soy milk a little bit longer than I used to. Mm-hmm, yes.
Mm-hmm. And this is why I'm so curious how Oreos would pair with the Next Milk and the not milk. Mm-hmm, and how those milks will do. This is the true test. if those milks soak into the cookies
appropriately, quote,
correctly.
Unquote. Back to Oatly, you would say Oatly was fantastic for dunking.
I think Oatly does,
because it did the
dunker.
correct soaking. Mm-hmm. That's what you're going for.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is. And I assume other oat milks
are similar in that way.
Similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Trader Joe's has an oat milk, don't they?
They do, and it was okay. I don't know why I'm not super impressed with the brands of oat milk.
Oat milk, yeah.
I tried the Oatly. Maybe I did. I tried the best one first, and it ruined all the others. Because then I thought, oat milk is gonna be the best thing since soy milk.
And then we tried some oat milks, and you were just like, absolutely not.
Yeah, we got the Costco one, and I was like, never again. Use it for baking, please. I don't want anything to do with that. It was sad. And then the Trader Joe's like, okay, this is better. This is good. but it's not worth the price for me.
Right. That gotcha.
But then again, if I really had a hankering for cookies and milk, I might choose that.
You might choose that. And it might be worth trying again, like we talked about with our sort of grace period
Give
there.
yourself time to adjust to those that are not Oatly brand.
Exactly.
Okay, maybe I'll do that.
Let's just hold a mirror up real quick.
And then with that said, when I do, like if I was going to go for an almond milk or a different brand for the cookies, I like the Silk brand. Like I think Silk almond is just...
Yeah. That's a good almond
I
one.
like it better than other almonds. Me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I know other people are different.
Yeah.
And what's the best for drinking plain?
I've already disclosed that I'm not a big
She
plant milk by itself drinker.
Mm,
So I don't know that I currently have a suggestion there. I mean, I've talked about I want to try the next milk again, and I guess the not milk we should try too. But
I just love drinking Silk soy.
you do. You do.
It just makes me happy.
Yeah.
And the Oatly oat, very happy as well. What was that oat milk we bought recently? Now that I think about it, we bought a different brand of oat milk recently. Was it Oatly? It was Oatly. Never mind. I was like, we had one recently that I really liked.
I think maybe it was Oatly when the Walmart we were shopping at didn't have Silk. Maybe
Yeah.
I did get the
and
Oatly.
it just sprung for the Oatly. That's
Mhm.
never mind. I was going to say, there's another one I really liked. No, that was it. All right. But again, sometimes some of those milks can be a little bit more filling, like if they're more thick.
Yeah.
So I think that almond milk is good to just drink by itself if you just
Mhm.
want, something that's not going to totally fill you up.
Yeah. I agree.
So hopefully that was helpful to help you determine which
Yeah.
milks you want for which purposes.
Yeah. None of this episode was sponsored, by the way.
Right.
So,
With all that said, let's talk a little bit about the nutrition and
Okay.
which one is the closest to cow milk for nutrition purposes.
okay.
And I like to bring this up because everyone from boomers to millennials at some point in their life had this really heavy messaging
Yes. I was
About-
the campaign.
about the importance of milk.
Yeah. All the Got Milk campaigns, the milk mustache campaigns with all the celebrities and athletes. The messaging was just so thorough and everywhere. I mean, libraries.
Right.
What does a Michael Jordan with a milk mustache have anything to do with reading books? And it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And it was push, healthy diet, strong bones, calcium, all of that.
Right. So now here we are. And I've had, how many books have we read? How many lectures have I gone to? How much continuing ed have I done? How many dietitians have I talked to? I still don't know really how much calcium I need.
Oh, right.
Or the kids need.
Right.
It's still confusing
Yeah.
for me who tries really hard.
You have a health education degree.
Right. Like personally and professionally, I've tried to wrap my mind around this and I just can't because there's too much information, there's too much misinformation, there's too many studies that were
Too
sponsored.
much confusion. Mhm.
Yeah. And so I don't want to argue about how much calcium we need.
Right.
We did do a calcium episode.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole conversation about that with the dietitian on calcium. And it's funny that I'm still kind of confused about how much calcium we need. We did go over...
Maybe you should listen to the episode again.
I should listen to it again because we did go over the guidelines.
Mhm.
And here's why I think I'm confused, because we went over the guidelines, the recommended dietary intakes or the recommended dietary allowances, the RDAs, right?
Mhm.
And you can look at those until you're blue in the face.
Till the cows come home.
Look at you. And then, I've read other books and research that suggest that those maybe aren't accurate
Mhm.
and how and why those were
Put in place.
put in place. And you look at the dietary guidelines for our country compared to the dietary guidelines from other countries. And that's where my confusion comes in.
Mm-hmm.
With all that said, I just listened to what our informed, educated dietitians say, which is what we got from that episode. And of course, we would encourage you to just talk to your dietitian, your healthcare provider, to understand how much calcium you need.
Yes.
So just throwing that out there. But it's still
it's not
a lot to understand.
Yeah, it's not crystal clear.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate that our system has become what it is, that makes having health and wellness more challenging. Knowing what we need, what nutrients we need in what amounts and where to get it has become so convoluted.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate is putting it lightly. But yeah. So hopefully there is you get something out between this episode and the calcium episode. You get some information that helps you make good choices for yourself. Make the choices that you need to make for yourself.
Yes.
Including finding the best pairing of milk and cookies.
But with all that said, I like to include some plant-based milks, especially with the kids as they grow.
Right.
Just as the
fortified plant-based milks, sort of as a safety net.
That's
almost.
what I was going to say. Yeah. Safety net. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people are of the mind that if you eat a whole food plant-based diet, or if you include enough leafy greens and beans and other plant sources of calcium, then they're going to be fine. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Sometimes I feel like it's probably true. And I don't want to mess this up.
Right.
Just like we like to take a multivitamin, we also I like to include the plant-based milks, the ones that are fortified with calcium, just as that safety net.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing a lot of other people might feel the same way for themselves, for their kids, for their parents that they care for, whoever it is, and you want to make sure that people are getting enough calcium. This is a great way to do that on a vegan diet.
And I think most of the plant-based milks that are fortified also have like the B vitamins and vitamin D and some other stuff in it. So it's not just about the calcium, although that's the main thing associated with cow milk is the calcium. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing that I'll say just off the top is most plant-based milks on the market today are fortified with many of the same things that you find in cow milk.
Right. Because cow milk is also fortified.
Interestingly.
Which people don't know or process that that's the case. So they are both fortified in much the same way.
Right. So, and some of the main things that people turn to cow milk for is calcium and vitamin D and some of the B vitamins like B12. And again, the vast majority of all the milks I named are probably fortified with the same amount or similar amounts. So if that's what you're looking for, you're probably good.
Yeah.
Now, some people really like to zero in on, well, how much protein they have, and they want to get their protein from milk. And some people want to zero in on how much fat do they have, and I want to limit my fat and saturated fat and stuff like that. So while most of them are going to be similar in a lot of those nutrients, the ones that are almost pretty dead on actually are silk, soy milk, and Ripple. And this is what
in the protein and the fat.
In everything.
In everything.
So I did like a side-by-side comparison so that we could really see. And I used, for the cow milk, I used the Creamland brand because that's what's most widely available, or I believe what's served in schools and what we have in New Mexico a lot. And I got the information from the Kroger website.
Okay.
So that's where I got this from. And then, I used the Silk soy milk and the Ripple brand. So in terms of calories, the Ripple has 90, Silk has 110, and cow has 130.
Okay.
So that's fairly close in calories, right? Your plant ones have a little bit less. In terms of fat, the Ripple and the Silk both have 4.5 grams, and the cow has 5 grams.
Okay.
Because I use the reduced fat. That's what is mostly served in schools, and most people, it's kind of a medium.
Yeah.
So they're pretty similar so far, right? Then they start to differ when we look at saturated fat and cholesterol. So Ripple and Silk have 0.5 gram of saturated fat, and the cow milk has 3 grams.
That's a pretty big difference.
Right, and the saturated fat's what we want to avoid.
Avoid.
That's one of the bad fats, right?
Yeah.
Quote unquote, worst fats. So that's where it's interesting. And then cholesterol, Ripple and Silk have 0 because plants have no cholesterol,
Right.
and the cow milk has 20 milligrams of cholesterol.
That's a major difference.
Right. So
especially if you're trying to watch your cholesterol intake.
right. So the easiest way to eliminate your cholesterol intake is to go vegan.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because plants don't have any cholesterol.
Right.
You'll get 0.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at sugars, because some people like to focus on sugars. And this is where some plant milks get a bad rap and flavored milks get a bad rap because of sugars.
Yeah.
But interestingly, when we look at these 3, people tend to forget that cow's milk has sugar in it. That's what lactose is. It is a sugar, right? So the Ripple has 5 grams, the Silk has 6 grams, and the cow milk has 12 grams
Wow, nearly double.
of sugar.
Well,
Or
it is double. Yeah, not nearly. It is double.
The maths.
The maths.
So, interesting fact. And then
yeah,
in terms of protein, all 3 of them have 8 grams of protein.
equal
So
across
the
the
protein
board.
is the exact same. Okay. Now let's talk about calcium. The main thing people go to cow milk for is the calcium, right?
Yeah.
The Ripple has 440 milligrams, which is roughly 30% of your daily value.
Okay. What's a serving?
1 cup. This
Okay.
is 1 cup serving. All 3 of them, it's 1 cup. So
Okay.
it's as equitable, as
Yeah.
the Silk has 450 milligrams, again, roughly 30% of your daily intake, and the cow milk has 300 milligrams, roughly 25%.
Interesting.
Which I always, all my life, thought cow milk had 30%. And that's why they'd say 3 cups a day, because that's going to equal 90, which is almost covers you.
Right.
Right. But I was really shocked, and I even, triple checked it, like, what? But that's what the Creamland has nowadays, according to this website. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then some of the plant milks are actually fortified with even more. I forget which one's off the top of my head, but they have upwards of 40 or 45% of your daily value.
Calcium. Wow.
So you could just have 2 cups.
Yeah.
And then
you're pretty much
covered.
Yeah.
And then the other one is vitamin D. And this is where vitamin D is fortified. Cow's milk doesn't naturally have vitamin D in it. They add it, right? So with the Ripple, it has 35% of your daily value of vitamin D. Silk has 15%, and the cow milk has 10%.
Wow.
So I like to, I think the plant milks are another source of vitamin D for me because everyone in the world is low in vitamin D, and I'm included in that. So I'm always trying to focus on my vitamin D, getting some sun, yada, yada. And also the plant milks can help you out in that sense. And I find it interesting that, the Silk, the Ripple, they have more than the cow milk.
That is interesting.
So, and the vitamin D also is added to help you absorb the calcium, which is why they fortify the cow milk with the vitamin D.
Exactly.
Because on its own, it actually doesn't do that much good for you.
Right.
And then lastly, there's another one that I think people look at for the milks is B12. Right?
That's another one that most people are deficient in, I believe, is the B12.
It is. Yeah. Vegans, omnivores, meat eaters, whatever. A lot of people are deficient in B12.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is why, because most people assume that if you're doing the omnivore standard American diet, you're getting plenty of B12 because B12 is in meat and dairy, right? Well, when you look at the nutrition information for the cow milk, there is no info about B12.
Really?
It's not there. Right.
So doesn't that usually mean that it's like less than a 0.5 gram because if anything, or is that just the trans fat rule?
That's just the trans fat rule, I think. But, they don't have to put every nutrient.
Okay.
They only have to report on certain nutrients, and then they might choose to report on others.
Okay.
Or choose not to, I guess.
Okay.
And so I just that's interesting. So we don't actually know. You don't actually know how much B12 is in
Cow milk.
or any of the products, any of the animal products that you're eating, because it's not labeled.
Interesting.
With the plant-based versions, they did label it because they do fortify it with B12. And so the Ripple has 2.5 micrograms, which is 100% of your daily value
Oh, wow.
in one cup.
Wow.
So the Silk has 3 micrograms, which is 120%. They do recommend, I believe, having getting a little bit more,
Yeah.
getting more than your 100%
because of
to account
absorption.
for absorption.
Yeah.
So if you have, a couple servings and you get 200 or 250, then
because
you're
they're
covering it.
anticipating you're not going to absorb every
100%.
single microgram.
Right.
Yeah.
And with the cow milk, so I went to the USDA website to investigate and see what they say cow milk has in terms of vitamin B12. And according to the USDA, the cow milk has 1.5 micrograms, which is 60% of your daily value. Yeah. So
It's really interesting. Like when you just put the numbers up like that comparison, it tells a story that maybe people don't want to hear or is difficult to comment on. But it is definitely a different story than we got in the 90s of how beneficial milk is.
Yes. Cow milk was always painted as this holy grail of nutrients.
Yes.
Like this perfect formula
Yeah.
for human nutrition.
Yeah.
And when you really delve deep, it's like, well, it doesn't even have vitamin D. They have to fortify it. Otherwise, you wouldn't absorb the calcium from it.
Right.
And then also people forget, like when you look at the nutrition value, I used to think this as a kid. How does every single cup of milk that comes out of a cow have exactly 130 calories and 5 grams of fat and 8 grams of protein? Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Is nature that precise?
Right.
No, they fortify it. They take the batch of milk, then they test it, and then they fortify it with whatever it needs so that each batch matches the exact same. So a lot of times they have to add, what they do is they add non-fat dry milk so that it gets the right amount of protein in it. So yeah, if you read the ingredients on you go buy a gallon of cow milk, it'll say ingredients, milk, comma, non-fat dry milk, comma,
Water
vitamin
or whatever,
D,
yeah.
comma, like it's not just milk the cow and put it in a bottle and serve it to you.
Yeah, because that's raw milk,
Right.
which is a whole thing.
And that can't be standardized. There's no standard what you're getting from it.
And there's a reason that milk has to be pasteurized, and finding raw milk is difficult. But anyway, will you do a web page for this and maybe put like the labels and point out and link to stuff? Had you thought about doing that?
I hadn't. I could think about doing that actually.
Because that might be a good resource page or reference page for people to go look at these things and just try and get, the labels or screenshots of the labels and compare them and link to, like how you referenced, you had to go to the USDA website because the B12 is not listed on cow milk. And so it's not actually disclosed. We don't know how much we're actually getting.
Yeah, I might do something like that. I'll at least share some resources links to point people to the direction, because it is helpful to see it visually than to just hear us talking about it.
Yeah.
If you want to follow up and kind of take a look at it, there will be stuff linked in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, digest it yourselves a little more. Digest it with your eyeballs.
Yeah, but I just thought it was fascinating. It's like, no wonder people are deficient in B12. We don't actually know how much we're getting.
Yeah, because is it even on cheese?
No, it's not listed on any of that stuff.
So we really don't know. People were really just assuming that it's fortified enough that we're okay, but clearly we're not, because B12 and vitamin D are like the two main deficiencies on the standard American diet. Even the non-standard American diet, it's the standard. It's like common deficiencies.
Yeah. So that's why I feel good with all these plant-based milks, and we do try to do a variety. Like you say, we do buy Silk like all the time.
Yeah.
And we don't have Silk in our fridge right this second, probably because I drank the last of it this morning.
Yep.
But I'm not running out, because we can do other stuff,
Yeah.
Having a variety and rotation is also good.
Yeah.
And adding other things.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we don't just say, oh, we got our calcium from our Silk, so we don't have to
We don't have to eat those greens.
No, we're very much like leafy greens. How else could we get leafy greens into our world?
Yes.
And all the other things, beans daily, all the things,
Yeah.
And this is another safety net. So hopefully that talk was interesting and informative.
Yeah.
And helpful,
Yeah.
to wrap our minds around the why, the how, the what, the where.
And some ideas on things to try next, or, maybe a fortified plant milk as a safety net for nutritional reasons is something to consider if it's not something you do on the regular already. So, hopefully that was helpful. And hopefully you will find your perfect pairing for milk and cookies after this episode.
Yes. Don't forget to check out the Incredible Planet Challenge from Eat the Change. We encourage you to participate, see what you have capacity for this month. If nothing else, try swapping out with a plant-based milk. As always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. We release new episodes every 2 weeks. You can always email us at plantbased@apnm.org or visit our website at apnm.org/plant-based for classes, recipes, and more resources.
See you in 2 weeks.